Welcome to Hamburgers and Hot Rods, the podcast featuring Southern California's classic car community and its food scene. Let's get started now. Hello everyone, I'm Jim Karras. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Hamburgers and Hot Rods podcast. The title of today's show is Flashlights for Service, LA's Historic Drive-Ins. In today's show, we're going to take a look at several of the approximate 200 local drive-in restaurants that were once located in Los Angeles. Over the years, from the early 1920s into the 1980s, Angelinos enjoyed good food and drink from the comfort of the interior of their automobiles at one of the fine eateries we will explore today. First on our list is Tam O'Shanter Restaurant. On June 6, 1922, Lawrence Frank and Walter Vandekamp opened Montgomery's Country Inn in Atwater Village, located at 2980 Los Feliz Boulevard in Los Angeles. The family is also famous for the potato chip business, the Vandekamp Bakery Empire, Vandekamp's drive-in chain, Lowry's Prime Rib, and the Five Crowns Restaurant. Upon the opening of Montgomery's Country Inn, it offered the first female-staffed car hop service in the country. In 1925, the family decided to transition the restaurant to a Scottish theme and renamed the establishment Tam O'Shanter after a beloved Robert Burns poem. Lawrence Frank's wife, Henrietta, had the idea of having the girls wear jaunty plaid uniforms. The Tam O'Shanter soon became one of the nation's first drive-ins with special wooden trays that enabled guests to dine in their cars. They called it Car Service Deluxe. In a 1933 advertisement of the newly remodeled Tam O'Shanter and its drive-in service, the restaurant's operators exclaimed, "We are happy to welcome you to our remodeled Tam O'Shanter Inn." Important among the changes made is the re-establishment of Car Service Deluxe, a feature which we originated 8 years ago. Ingenious tables installed in your car enable you to sit and eat in the comfort and privacy of your own automobile. For years, the restaurant was a favorite lunch spot for Walt Disney and his animators, and many of the Hollywood elite, including Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and John Wayne. In 1967, the family changed the name of the restaurant to the Great Scott and focused on family dining. Car hop service was no longer offered at the restaurant. In 1982, on the 60th anniversary of the restaurant, the family changed its name back to the Tam O'Shanter. This storybook-themed restaurant continues as the oldest continuously run restaurant by the same family at the same location in Los Angeles. Still operated by third and fourth generation family members, the Tam O'Shanter continues as one of the crown jewels in the family's restaurant holdings portfolio. Next on our list is the Pig Stand. In 1931, on the southeast corner of Sunset and Vine in Hollywood, the Pig Stand, a unit of the Dallas, Texas drive-in chain, opened its first California location. The first Pig Stand in Texas was built by an entrepreneur named Jesse Kirby along a Dallas-Fort Worth highway in October of 1921, a year before the Montgomery's Country Inn opened its doors back here in Los Angeles. The Pig Stand is believed to be the first restaurant in the country to offer car hop service. In 1925, the chain expanded here into California with the opening of its Pig Stand number 18 in Hollywood. In all, the Pig Stand would establish 4 of its drive-ins in Los Angeles and continued to operate them until the 1950s. Its slogan was America's Motor Lunch. Kirby and his partners made one of the first franchising agreements in restaurant history, and pig stands began to crop up everywhere. By 1934, there were more than 130 pig stands in 9 states. However, most of them were in California and Florida. Meanwhile, the chain kept on innovating. In 1931, a Los Angeles franchisee of the chain at pig stand number 21 began to allow car owners to order and receive bagged meals from a single window. Thus, it is believed that California's pig stand number 21 became the first drive-through restaurant in the world in 1931. Food historians also believe that pig stand cooks invented deep-fried onion rings and the chicken fried steak sandwich. Wartime gasoline and food rationings hit the pig stands hard, and after the war, they struggled to compete with newer, flashier drive-ins. By the end of the 1950s, all of the franchises outside of the state of Texas had closed. By 2005, even the Texas pig stands were struggling to survive, with only 6 remaining in the whole state. And by the next year, in 2006, they had all disappeared. We move on with our third drive-in chain, which is McDonald's drive-ins in Los Angeles. Rusty McDonald operated a chain of drive-ins in the Los Angeles area during the 1930s and 40s, long before the fast food behemoth McDonald's came onto the scene. Rusty McDonald spells his last name capital MC, capital ONNELL. His restaurants, designed by the revered architect Wayne McAllister, were fabulously kitschy and garish, and customers could spot their huge neon signs from miles away. Rusty located a drive-in on the northwest corner of Sunset Boulevard and La Brea in Los Angeles. In the 1940s, this location would become the site where a tiny Naylor's drive-in would be built. McDonald's drive-ins offered fried chicken, fried oyster sandwiches, shoestring potatoes, honey and toast, chicken broth with noodles, hot chili, local bottled beer, and fresh homemade pies, along with other menu items. McDonald's operated a total of 6 drive-ins throughout Los Angeles. Other McDonald's drive-in locations included Beverly Boulevard and Western Avenue, Wilshire and Robertson's Boulevards, Yucca Street at Cahuenga, Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue, and Sunset Boulevard and La Brea. In addition to his drive-ins, Rusty McDonald also operated 8 family restaurants throughout the Los Angeles area. McDonald's was well known for serving some of the best fried chicken in the state, raising its own chickens on a 200-acre ranch at Daggett, California. McDonald's survived until the 1950s before sadly closing. In 1935, the Simons brothers, already known for their greater Los Angeles area chain of family dining restaurants, decided to cater to the car-centric craze well established by the mid-1930s. They opened the first Simons drive-in at the northwest corner of Fairfax Avenue and Wilshire Boulevard. This futuristic drive-in looked very similar to many of the other drive-ins built in the 1930s. That's because so many of these futuristic-looking drive-ins were designed by architect Wayne McAllister. Wayne McAllister was a Los Angeles-based architect who was a leader in the Googie style of architecture that embraced the automobile and the space age. Inspired by tail fins and gleaming chrome, he elevated the drive-in restaurant to futuristic works of art. During the 1930s, McAllister created iconic circular drive-in restaurants throughout Southern California for many restaurant operators, including Simon's, Herbert's, Robert's, and McDonald's. The Simon brothers identified commercial center strips for locations of its eateries, such as Wilshire Boulevard, Sunset Strip, Olympic Boulevard, Hill Street, and Broadway Street. At its peak in the post-war era of the 1940s, Simon's operated 9 drive-ins throughout the greater Los Angeles area at the following locations: Wilshire and Fairfax, Wilshire and Hoover, Wilshire and Sycamore, Sunset and Horn, Sunset and Highland, Olympic and Soto, Figueroa and Exposition, Washington and Grand, and Wilshire and Linden in Beverly Hills. In the 1940s, Simon's drive-ins offered menu favorites such as special steak plate, fried spring chicken, fresh ground hamburger steak, hot turkey sandwich, Denver sandwich on toast, and a jumbo double burger. The chain also served fountain soft drinks and a complete menu of ice cream fountain delights such as double thick malted milk, milkshakes, ice cream sundaes, and creamy root beer floats. The Fairfax and Wilshire location later became the site of the famous landmark restaurant Johnny's Coffee Shop. In 1945, the Simons Drive-In at the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Horn Avenue became a Dolores Drive-In. By the 1950s, Simons began selling the remaining drive-ins to other operators, and many of them became Stan's Drive-Ins restaurants. Stan's Drive-Ins were a chain of drive-ins with at least a dozen Los Angeles area locations in the 1950s and early 1960s. Many of the original Carpenter Sandwiches and Simon's Drive-In restaurants were converted into Stan's Drive-In locations. In the 1950s, Stan Burke owned the popular Stan's Drive-In chain that featured bright neon signs and attentive car hops at locations all over California, from Hollywood to Sacramento. Stan's offered standard menu fare at the time, including the Crazy Dog, which was a large hot dog on a bun, barbecue beef or ham sandwich, steak sandwich with barbecue sauce, fried chicken sandwich, and fish and chips. The menu also included salads, cold sandwiches, soups and soft drinks, iced tea, and coffee. Stan Burke went on to open the well-known Sherman Oaks restaurant, Stanley Burke's, located at 5043 Van Nuys Boulevard. In 1964, the restaurant was renamed by new owner Martin Cable as Corky's Coffee Shop, and although not a drive-in, nevertheless, it was a popular Van Nuys Boulevard cruising spot for many decades. Corky's recently closed its doors on Sunday, December 8th, 2019. Next on our list is Pat Marr's Drive-In. Pat Marr's Drive-In was a local landmark in the city of El Segundo. Located at the corner of Imperial Highway and Sepulveda Boulevard, it was another one of architect Wayne McAllister's designs, and the restaurant opened on Memorial Day in 1939. Owners Howard Patrick and Norman Marsh were not originally in the restaurant business. They were talent booking agents for magicians and orchestras. However, in 1939, they were looking to diversify their business holdings and settled upon the drive-in idea. Once Pat Marr's opened, it was a resounding success, and Patrick and Marsh decided to build a state-of-the-art 14-unit motel on the hill directly behind the restaurant. They had McAllister design the 35,000 split-level structure, which opened on May 8, 1941. At first, the duo tried keeping their booking agency running as well, but by late 1941, the motel and restaurant had become so popular that they had to devote all of their energies to it. In the fall of 1942, Marsh joined the Army, leaving Patrick to manage the Pat Marr's complex. Because of the difficulties of getting supplies during wartime, Pat Marr's had to close temporarily. 2 weeks after Marsh returned home from the military after the end of World War II, Howard Patrick died suddenly. Marsh, now the sole owner, reopened the Pat Marr's complex and then completely remodeled its interiors in 1948. In 1960, the Pat Marr's complex closed and the property was sold. Former El Segundo resident Jim Stennett bought the drive-in building for $500. He and his business partners planned to use it as the clubhouse for the El Segundo golf course they were developing. He spent $1,500 moving the Pat Marr's building to the golf course site. The round building became the Golf Course Pro Shop, where it remained until plans for remodeling the course into the lakes at El Segundo called for its demolition in the late 1980s. Preservationists tried in vain to save the building, with some proposing to move it to downtown El Segundo and turn it into a historical museum. But building inspectors found too many problems: dry rot, termites, and electrical code violations to make preserving the structure infeasible, and it was torn down in 1993. Next on the list, Scrivener's Drive-Ins. Opening in the 1930s, Scrivener's Drive-Ins were a popular fixture in the Los Angeles area for several decades. Their circular, streamlined, modern style was just like the other drive-ins of the area. By the mid-1950s, Scrivener's had expanded throughout Los Angeles with locations on Crenshaw, Manchester, Western, and Wilshire. In November of 1956, they opened their 11th location on 174th and Western. What makes Scrivener's an icon of the times was something unique that ties it to the teen culture of the late 1940s and 50s. A local disc jockey in Los Angeles would do live remote broadcasts from the Scrivener's parking lots. By 1949, Art Laboe was hosting shows for KXLA from the drive-in restaurant on Sunset and Cahuenga. After a brief period of doing a celebrity interview show, he returned to Scrivener's again, this time with radio station K-Pop, to do live afternoon broadcasts. That's around the time things really got big. Art Laboe made a name for himself as a young disc jockey by hauling his bulky radio equipment for live afternoon broadcasts at this drive-in. He also did shows from another Scrivener's on Imperial Highway in Western. This was Laboe's most popular remote location and one that he would occupy for 8 years, from 1951 to 1959. LeBeau's show was such a huge draw, and teenagers would mob the parking lot and cause traffic to back up around the restaurant. "We used to get 200 cars on a Saturday night," he told the Los Angeles Times. Other stations, he said, were playing Doris Day and big band music, but LeBeau, credited with being the first DJ to play rock and roll on the West Coast, was broadcasting Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis, and it spread like a prairie fire. Once the broadcasts ended, Scrivener's met with the same fate as many of the other fabulous drive-in restaurants, and faded into obscurity. The world-famous Brown Derby also offered drive-in car hop service at one of its 4 restaurant locations. In 1940, Willard's Chicken Inn restaurant was purchased by legendary movie director Cecil B. DeMille, who brought in the Brown Derby and Car Cafe, which offered fine dining and 24-hour car service in keeping with the drive-in restaurant fad of the era. At the time, DeMille also was part owner of the Wilshire Brown Derby restaurant. The Los Feliz Brown Derby was located at the southwest corner of Los Feliz and Hillhurst. While the Brown Derby is long gone, the building still stands, and although it has been redesigned, it is still home to an operating restaurant. Today, the popular gastropub Mess Hall Kitchen operates at that location. In 1944, during World War II, Amanda and Ralph Stevens, after owning various other restaurants in different states, moved to Los Angeles and shortly thereafter opened the Dolores Drive-In restaurant located at 8801 Sunset Boulevard at the corner of Horn Avenue in Hollywood. Previously, this location operated as a Simon's Drive-In from 1935 to 1945. In 1956, the Stevens' son Robert and his wife Lucille also moved to Los Angeles to help manage the newly leased Dolores restaurant located at 8531 Wilshire Boulevard, adjacent to La Cienega and Ladue Road in Beverly Hills. The restaurant was a hit with the local teenagers in the 1940s and 50s with its car hops, Suzy Q's, and J.J. Burgers, all which became a staple in the community for the next 30 years. The family exited the original Hollywood location in the mid-1950s, and the site became home of Jack's on the Strip until the mid-1960s, when that establishment was demolished to make way for a succession of music stores, including Muntz Stereo and then Tower Records in 1971. Dolores Restaurants went on to open a few family restaurants without drive-in service around the greater Los Angeles area. Dolores drive-ins could also be found at Sepulveda and Washington Boulevards and at Sunset and La Brea. In 1981, the last Dolores drive-in, the Beverly Hills Drive-In, was forced to close to make room for a high-rise office building. The last of the chain's restaurants, Dolores Restaurant and Bakery, located at 11407 Santa Monica Boulevard in West Los Angeles, closed on Tuesday, June 26, in 2012. Van de Kamp's Holland Dutch Bakeries was a bakery formed in 1915 and headquartered in the Van de Kamp Bakery Building in Los Angeles. The company's trademark, blue wind wheels, featured on their grocery store signs and atop their chain of famous restaurants that were known throughout the region. The Van de Kamp's central production facility on Fletcher Drive is a memorable building. Before the creation of an underpass on Fletcher Drive, car drivers and passengers lined up for miles to wait for the passage of the long freight trains that passed between Atwater Village and Silver Lake. Getting stuck on the road allowed drivers to pause long enough to see the googie architecture beauty that was a Van de Kamp's bakery and coffee shop with drive-in service. The drive-in stood adjacent to the Van de Kamp Bakery headquarters on the corner of Fletcher Drive and San Fernando Road in Atwater. Its architect was also Wayne McAllister. Wayne McAllister used streetline modern-style architecture. The restaurant design included neon-trimmed roof lines and pylons with 2 oval-shaped buildings added onto the original hexagonal bakery, affectionately known as the Dutch Windmill. In 1915, Theodore Van de Kamp and his brother-in-law Lawrence Frank sold potato chips in a tiny store at 236.5 Spring Street in Los Angeles. Their wives were the saleswomen. In 1916, they renamed their store Van de Kamp's Holland Dutch Store and diversified into baked goods, pretzels, and macaroons. Their wives designed the trademark Blue Dutch maid costumes that would be worn by a generation of Van de Kamp workers. By 1929, Van de Kamp's grew into a chain with 95 outlets in Los Angeles. They built a central production facility to supply its stores located at 2945 Fletcher Drive near San Fernando Road. The company went on to found Lowry's and the Tam O'Shanter Inn. Van de Kamp's Holland Dutch bakeries were sold by the Van de Kamp family and acquired by General Baking Company in 1956. The company was also sold to private investors in 1979 and closed in bankruptcy in 1990. The Van de Kamp's brand is now owned by Ralph's supermarket chain and is used for their line of private label baked goods. Next on our list is Tiny Naylor's drive-in restaurants. Tiny Naylor opened his first Los Angeles restaurant in 1948 and named it after his son, Biff Naylor. Biff's coffee shop was located on the corner of Cahuenga Boulevard and Yucca Street in Hollywood. This restaurant didn't offer drive-in service, but soon thereafter, Tiny opened a second restaurant in his own namesake, and the Tiny Naylor's restaurant chain was born. The first Tiny Naylor's restaurant and drive-in was located on the northwest corner of Sunset and La Brea in Hollywood. Tiny Naylor's restaurants and drive-ins was one of California's original family-style restaurants founded by W.W. Tiny Naylor. Naylor got the nickname Tiny because he stood 6'4" and weighed 320 pounds. The Tiny Naylor's restaurant chain grew to at least 9 locations around Southern California, with other restaurants located in Northern California, including San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, Vallejo, and Stockton. Menu offerings included Tiny's Special Fried Chicken Dinner, a Steak and Shake Special, Tiny's Tender Cube Steak Special, Hickory Smoked Ham Steak Hawaiian Dinner, veal schnitzel topped with a fried egg and served with fried potatoes all covered with country gravy, and a breaded fried oyster plate with tartar sauce on the side. Breakfast and dessert menus were also offered. Tiny died in 1959, 11 years after opening his first restaurant. The family continued with his restaurant business, although Tiny Naylor's went out of business in 1980. The Naylor family purchased Dupar's in 2004, which it still owns and operates. Dupar's expanded in 2009 to include several locations from the bankrupt Baker Square chain. Other Los Angeles area drive-ins for which were well established but which we couldn't cover in this series includes PK Sandwiches, which served customers in the 1930s and was located at 4406 Crenshaw Boulevard at West Vernon Avenue, Carl's Drive-In on Pacific Coast Highway in Pacific Palisades, which operated in the 1940s, Herbert's Drive-In, which also operated in the 1940s at Beverly and Fairfax, Melody Lane Drive-In, located at Wilshire and Western, Robert's Drive-Ins, with locations at Wilshire and Vermont in Los Angeles, and in Burbank at Olive and Victory. Gwen's Coffee Shop and Drive-In, located at 2915 East Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. This was a popular spot in that area in the late 1940s, which closed and was demolished in 1992. Many of these early drive-ins displayed signs that instructed patrons seeking car hop service to, quote, "Please flash your lights for service." This practice was practical for the time, as electronic speaker systems developed in the 1950s and used by drive-in operators a few decades later were yet to be available to these early in-car dining operators. That's our take on the history of the early Southern California drive-in scene. As time marched on, newer restaurant concepts, including fast food models, offered patrons more standardized fare and in-store dining options. Restaurants with drive-through concepts slowly replaced a majority of the former drive-in concepts as newcomers arrived on the scene, including In-N-Out in 1948, Jack in the Box in 1951, Der Wiener Schnitzel in 1961, and many more. Now it's time for Sabrina with the upcoming car events around Southern California, courtesy of SoCal Car Culture.
Here's what's happening for the weekend of February 14th through the 16th. On Friday, February 14th, starting off in Buena Park, is the Classic Car Fridays at the Elks Lodge, located at 7212 Melrose Street from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. In Burbank, The weekly Bob's Big Boy Show at 4211 West Riverside Drive from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. Also in Burbank, Valley Cruise Night at the Foster's Freeze at 201 South Glen Oaks Boulevard from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. In Garden Grove, their weekly Friday night car show at 12891 Historic Main Street from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. In Northridge, at the Bob's Big Boy, 8876 Corbin Ave, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And if you're in Yucca Valley, at the Sonic Drive-In, 58145 Highway 62, from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Saturday, February 15th, in Brea, Classic Car Show at the Farmer Boys, 500 West Lambert Road, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Carlsbad has Seabed Cars, 7130 Avenida Encinas, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. In Corona, Cars and Coffee Corona, Celine Headquarters, 2755 Wardlow Road, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. In Covina, Saturday Morning Car Corral at the O'Reilly Auto Parts, located at 501 North Azusa Avenue, from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Dana Point has the Monarch Bay Plaza Car Show at Crown Valley and PCH from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Gardena has a Classic Cruisers Car Show at the Farmer Boys, located at 641 West Redondo Beach Boulevard from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Garden Grow at the DK Donuts, 9971 Chapman Ave at Brookhurst, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. In Grand Terrace, it's Cars and Coffee, 22365 Barton Road, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Huntington Beach has the famous donut derelicts at Magnolia and Adams, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. La Cañada, Early Rodders meets at the United Artists Theater, 1919 Verdugo Boulevard, 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. In Long Beach, the Winter OCTO meet is being held at Veterans Memorial Stadium at 5000 East Lou Davis Street, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. In Long Beach, Spring Street Parking Lot Parade, 6522 East Spring Street at 6 p.m. In Newbury Park, the Conejo Valley Cars and Coffee at 2700 Teller Road, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. In Palm Desert, it's the Silver Scorpions Cars and Breakfast, located at 44491 Town Center Way, from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. Placentia has donuts and dipsticks at 2001 East Orangethorpe Avenue, from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Rancho Santa Fe also has Cars and Coffee, 5978 Paseo Delicias, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. San Clemente has South OC Cars and Coffee at the outlets at San Clemente in their southwest corner, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Temecula has a Sweetheart Car Show at 44651 Avenida de Misiones, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Torrance, Caffeine Cruisers, Artesia and Hawthorne Boulevard, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And in Valencia, it's the Coffee and Cars at 23222 Valencia Boulevard, from 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. On Sunday, February 16th, not too many, starting off with Chino Hills with the Cars and Coffee Chino Hills at the Donut Star at 4195 Chino Hills Parkway, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Fullerton has DKK's Air-Cooled Carbs and Coffee, 125 West Santa Fe Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Huntington Beach has Cars and Coffee at Pacific City, located at 21010 Pacific Coast Highway, from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. In Lakewood, Hotcakes and Hot Rods at the Glory Days Sports Grill, 4132 Woodruff Ave, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Malibu has the Wheels and Waves Malibu at the Malibu Country Mart, 3835 Cross Creek Road, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. In Northridge, it's the Classic Cars and Coffee at the Western Bagel, 19500 Plummer Street at 6 a.m. In Seal Beach, Hot Rods at the Beach, Glory Days Seaside Grill, 620 Pacific Coast Highway, from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And in Woodland Hills, it's Supercar Sunday at Pierce College, 6201 Winnetka Avenue, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that's what's happening around Southern California in the car scene during the weekend of February 14th to the 16th. Be sure to visit SoCalCarCulture.com to check out the latest information and updates on car-related events happening throughout Southern California.
In our next episode, we will conclude our 5-part series on Southern California's drive-in restaurants. We will feature the return of drive-in service to Southern California with the emergence of multiple Sonic drive-ins opening up all over the Southland. Founded in 1953, Sonic Corp., based in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, has been serving customers with its customer-friendly car hub service for over 60 years. We will share with you some history about this national chain, its current expansion plans here in Southern California, and where you can visit a location near you. Please join us as we explore the current offerings of America's drive-in. That's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed your time with us today. You can visit us online at hamburgersandhotrods.com, where you can check out our show notes, listen to our complete show library, as well as checking out all of the various platforms where our show can be heard. Until next time, thanks for listening. We'll see you then.